Nice to be here. I was just saying to Kevin before we started that this is selfishly, it's a really full circle moment because when I had the opportunity to take on my current role, which is the coordinator of DEIB, as we call it, for ACS, which is a group of 3 schools in Greater London, really in Surrey in the UK. I didn't know where to start. I knew it was really, obviously keen. We want to get it right. And Dom DeLay, who many of you will know, who started the council at ACS, gets full credit for that. It took me under his wing, connected me with AIELOC, and I found Kevin, and half hour talking to Kevin and that warm, welcoming smile. And I thought, all right, we're going to be okay. And then shortly after that, I saw that AIELOC were involved with the Anti-Discrimination Task Force kickoff in Geneva, had the very privileged opportunity to make it to that. And that's where we got the steps that we needed to kind of start to shape and frame our work. So one of the things that we do a lot is lean into our values when it comes to DEIB. We'll get into them as we go through. But anytime we're not sure where to go next, or we're, in the times that we experience pushback and all of that type of thing, they've helped us a lot. And one of the things that has come out of it is our human library initiative that we've now run twice at ACS Egham, one of our 3 campuses. So I have here with me today Anne-Marie, who firstly is my dear friend, and secondly is my colleague, and soon to be both of my 2 children's teacher. Anne-Marie is the head of early years at ACS Egham, incredibly experienced, and it's important to add, is a real thought leader in play, especially in the early years, but we're looking at it as we go up through our primary school. And of course, within play is a celebration of identity and individuality. So we look at that a lot. But Anne-Marie is also a racial equity lead for all of ACS. And so together we've worked on this initiative. So I'm going to turn over to her because she gets full credit for this idea. It was hers from the first place. I can coordinate the heck out of it, but she gets the credit for the idea, certainly. So Anne-Marie.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much for inviting us on here. It's a real honor. Thank you to come and listen and come and speak. And Lauren, you are amazing. And I can't take credit for this at all. Lots of people were involved. It's like a teamwork. So yeah, human library. You can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So I suppose it just started with the fact that we believe that stories bring us together. Everybody loves a story. Since time immemorial, people gather to listen to stories, and that keeps people engaged. People are less likely to want to sit and listen to facts and figures than they are to listen to someone authentically talking about their own perspective and their own lived experience. So that was the kind of philosophy that brought us together to think, how can we do that? How can we bring our community together by listening to each other and going beneath the surface and finding out more about each other? And so, by chance came across the Human Library. We had started a little sort of initiative where we had people make videos and tell a story online, and you could go and access it, but that didn't work so well, kind of, drifted off and didn't really take off. And we realized that it's the interaction. So thinking about a human library was having that interaction and conversation between people. We're not really that huge a school, but there are people that I have never spoken to, I see walking around, and there are people that I do know, but probably very sort of professional, surface-like. In a nutshell, we believe that for discrimination, for stereotyping people, putting people into boxes, labeling people, once you get beneath that surface, it just, even listening to one story from one person makes you closer. I see it as a kind of a quick link to seeing someone's humanity is when you take the time to just listen to even one story about themselves. So yeah, next slide, please. Let's move on to the next slide. This came from the people who originally devised and invented the Human Library movement, which is now, held all over the world. People hold them in cafes, in libraries, but it was started in Denmark in about 2003, I think. And it was just a way to break down stereotypes. So basically, the concept is a human library is where you can borrow a book, but the book is human. The book is a living book. So you can borrow a book, sit down with them, have a conversation, and find out something about their lived experience. So there are lots of versions, lots of people, lots of walks of life that can be shared. And the ultimate aim is to bring people together and to break down those walls that keep us apart. So as it says here, it's a place where real people are on loan to readers. So it's a positive framework for conversations and basically challenging stereotypes. So we took that and we honed it into a direction that we wanted at our school in our community, which is an international school. We wanted to bring our community together, get beneath the surface, and then, just bring us closer, I suppose. Yeah. Next slide. I don't know if that's mine or yours, Lauren. Okay, so this is just a real quick, very short video from the Human Library that just gives you a kind of flavor of what it's about and what inspired us. No volume, but oh well.
No sound. Oh, fortunate.
Yeah, you can sort of get the gist, I suppose. He's basically saying he feels ashamed of himself for making judgments about people, and now he realizes. Yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. You can see the kind of philosophy behind it. And we decided just to take it and shape it and fit it into our community. Over to Lauren.
Thank you. So yeah, essentially how it works is, of course, we know that the ultimate goal is getting to our shared common humanity, right? And so that's always what we're trying to do. How can we do that? And so as I was saying, our values really work for us in that way. The values came before we set up our council, but they've helped us countless times. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I don't expect anyone to read it. I know how it's like, but just for some context. So our you love when people do that. Our DEIB council started like so many did in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. I give credit to Dom DeLay, who fully deserves that. And essentially Dom put out a call to all of ACS. We have a central office as well, and just said, what are we doing? We have a huge responsibility. Let's get going. And the people listened. And so our council started with, I don't know, maybe the first meeting, 15, 20 people. And now 4 years later, we have this charter, which is in effect, which I'm really proud to say had a huge student input in that, a lot of parent input as well, and has evolved over the years. We reflect on this constantly. We have a DEIB council so on our mailing list are just shy of 50 people. We have meetings that run monthly for an hour on Zoom. So this is across the schools and the central office. I think it's important to say students are always invited, and we often have a good number of students that will a number of students that will attend. And then we have people who are teaching and non-teaching staff, and then we have people in our most senior leadership. So we have a CEO and we have a director of teaching and learning, heads of schools, HR director. Those people are almost always there. I think it is our CEO and head a director of learning deserve the credit to know that both of them have never missed a meeting. So it makes a big difference, right? And we've been I really understand how privileged we are to have that. And so therefore we've been able to do a lot of different things. Some things we've learned are more impactful than others, obviously, and we figure that out by anecdotal data. We've got a ton of anecdotal data because we ask for a lot of feedback and listen and pivot and reshape. And I think probably our tone has been what has helped us the most, because we never profess to be experts. As we're not, we know that there's so much to learn all the time, but we're really open to feedback and we're motivated. So we have our council, and then of course, people who come to the meetings, that's fantastic, but we make it really clear, it's not required. Please just spread the advocacy. We're here for you. We also discovered that staff networks were something that our staff were looking for. So at the moment, we have Anne Marie, who leads racial equity. We have an LGBTQ plus network. We have deaf and hard of hearing, gender equity, and we'll have a neurodiversity. We have a belief in religion network. And again, it's those leaders it's all volunteers. So just for context, it's a question we get a lot, is that so my role is 0.5, and then I also teach lower school art the rest of that time. And that I look after, so it's the coordinator for all 3 of our schools. So I'm the only one that has a technical position in DEIB. Everyone else is volunteer. We're working on that. That's the next step. It's a battle, always, as we all know. So those are our staff networks. They offer a sense of belonging. They offer shared passion and just a contact point as well, because we use their guidance all the time. So that's kind of how the structure of it works. So we rely on our charter a lot. We reflect on it all the time. And you could do the next slide, please. Within it here is our vision, and I think, you know, this whole line about the power of a single story, the danger of a single story, we understand that really fully. So always looking at that. Our charter, we invited our lower school students to put it to easier understand. We call it kids speak. And so we're well aware that these things exist. These are the tenets that we're always looking for through our work with the children. I like to think that the students are well aware of all the work. It depends on who you ask, right? We know how it is. And I think for whatever reason, we've really learned that in our lower school, it can be easier to have some of these conversations and know the work is spreading. And there's a million reasons why that is, you know, but it's just something that we've reflected on, and we're looking at our advisories and things to spread it. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a couple things to point out, and then we'll share into more specifics of how ours went. So the human library happened during a staff meeting. I think that's a huge point. So it wasn't an extra, it was required. So staff meeting for us is approximately 75 people. We invite all staff. It ended up, so for this, we called for volunteers, for people to be willing to share a story. We gave our own examples, which we'll get into a minute. Anne Marie shared her example of being mixed race and growing up a predominantly white area in the UK. I shared, so this was ahead of time, we were calling volunteers. I shared my example of losing my parents at a very young age. And so I think that set the tone, right? We also made it very clear that that doesn't have to be a common theme of quite these deep, intense stories as well. So you'll see there's a range of stories. In the very first instance, we had 26 volunteers, 25 or 26 volunteers to share the stories. And ultimately we had 22 or 23, I think, share for the first human library. It is small group, so it's not a presentation. It's not in front of a large audience. Happens at a staff meeting. The first time we gave it an hour, we learned we need a lot more than that. The next time we were given an hour and a half, and then we went directly into some other workshop as only schools can do, and we kind of lost the buzz. So we've learned it needs to be an entire session. So it's a small group, maybe 5 or 6 people. It's all volunteer for the living books. And then the staff have the option to choose in advance, so that gives the speakers, the human books, the option to know maybe who's coming, and it help people prepare for that. And it's just an open conversation. And that's how it's pitched to people. And in our case, we were really lucky that we had so many people volunteer. Okay, Anne Marie.
Yeah. So as Lauren was saying, you know, those were the logistics of getting people involved. We also actually did presentations to the staff members, just to give them an idea of what a human library is, so that we emphasize the fact that it's a conversation rather than a presentation. And then we got quite a lot of people volunteering. Here on this slide just gives you a flavor of some of the titles of the books that we got. So you can see there's like quite a diverse range of things. Some are sort of intriguing that they seem funny. You know, How My Parents Tried to Kill Me was an interesting one. And then some are a little bit deeper. For example, the positively terminal. My husband 3 years ago was diagnosed with cancer, with stage 4 cancer, and he gave a talk or had a conversation about being terminally ill. And the power of that story, for me, this is a good example of the power of telling a story, because a day later he had an email from a member of staff who had attended his conversation, and they said that they lost their father to cancer on that day of the Human Library 6 years ago, and they were still, you know, living with that. And they found his talk reassuring. And I thought that word, reassuring, and comforting, it was another way that he described it. I thought even if one person had heard that story and had that response, that would be worth it in the end. And that's somebody that he didn't know, he'd seen in passing. So yeah, so these are just a few of the titles, the book titles. The next slide, please.
Can I just say, Marie, sorry to interrupt. I think that it's just important to point out too that these are a range of members of staff, right? So we have, again, in there is our like a director of partnerships, so central office people as well. We noticed, I think we noticed a perceived and sometimes an actual divide between different groups of members of staff around. So the central office and upper school and lower school, and even various divisions within them, divisions within divisions. And this was where we came up with the idea. So we wanted to make sure to invite everyone. So it was interesting. We made a point to speak with members of security, members of our facilities team, and make sure everyone knew that they were included, and we really wanted them there. Yet we haven't had any uptake but that we're not giving up. But we think that's really important. It just hasn't happened yet. What we have had is the senior leaders, the head of school, that type of thing. And I think that it helps, right? It's this common humanity.
So when we were researching, you know, starting it up, I spoke to one person in a school, an international school in Korea, Chadwick. She's the librarian there, and we had a few Zoom meetings because they've been, you know, holding human libraries for a few years. But with their human library, they extend it to beyond the community. So they would have like the guy who, you know, sells the fruit on the stand down the road, or the taxi driver who brings people to work, or so they extended it beyond, which I think would be, later on we'll talk about our aims. And I think that kind of embracing the community, the whole community. At the moment, we're just at a teaching faculty stage. We gave this protocol as a sort of guidance to, you know, for each of the readers and the living books, so that, you know, you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay to end the conversation. So this was just a little protocol that we had available to people. Yeah, next slide, please. Okie dokie. So this is just an example. We thought we'd use ourselves, seeing as we're here. These were blurbs that were made available to everybody, and they could pick the books they wanted, like you would in a library. You could read a little blurb and see who it was by, and then you could sign up for that session with that person. So my title was Not White, Not Black Enough. I'm a mixed heritage. My father was Ghanaian. He died a couple of years ago. I was born in Ghana. I have a massive family in Ghana because my great-great-grandfather had 8 wives and 42 children. So I have a vast family. But also when I was 11, my mother is white. My mother took my sister and I away and brought us back to England. And so my conversation was just about that paradox of having a Ghanaian heritage and them being immediately kind of thrust from one to the other into an all-white community, because it was Cornwall in 1978, where there weren't any Black people around to see. I was I was the daughter of a diplomat, and when I came into school and was asked by children, does your dad live in a tree? I couldn't I couldn't understand why would they think my father lived in a tree, because my father was very middle class, actually, compared to a lot of people in Ghana. So I talked about that to my readers, talked about the experience of being, neither one or the other. So going back to Ghana and treated sometimes as a foreigner, but in England, obviously I'm not white. So, the whole thing of friends, having a lot of white friends who would try to reassure you by saying, but we don't see you as Black, we just see you as normal, we don't see you as Black, and the whole way that affects you, all the while trying not to come across as a big sob story, because, my life is also privileged compared to a lot of people. So that was really interesting to see the responses, because some of the readers in my groups were people I didn't know at all, and found out that we had things in common, or they'd read the same books as me, people I wouldn't have expected. But also people in the reading group were friends, long-term friends I've had for years, who hadn't heard a lot of these things that I talked about, and actually fed back that they felt angry on my behalf. And talked about that when George Floyd was murdered, suddenly my Facebook page was filled with messages from white friends that I'd had, or white other students, peers in my school when I was younger, saying, I'm really sorry if I ever said or did anything to, suddenly they woke up and started to reflect. So that was the gist of my whole story. And I tried to, generate a conversation. I don't want to go in on too much because it's too long. But over to Lauren, she can talk about her story.
Thank you, Marie. When I was thinking about the story I was going to tell for this, I knew I wanted to be a living book. And I thought there's a lot of things I can come up with. I had the chance to spend a lot of time in Nepal, maybe the less things learned there, et cetera. And then it just dawned on me, looking back on it, it seems ridiculous, that really the story for me, which has defined, I will say, I think is true, my life is losing my parents when I was quite young. And I think saying that, it seems very obvious, but I think as with trauma, you just keep going and maybe don't realize quite how impactful it is, because you don't have another choice. Yeah. So for me, my story probably it begins before I was born. My dad studied as a priest. He qualified as he was a priest, and my mom was a nun, and both of them left the church very quickly because they realized they felt it was too antiquated. They were looking for a more progressive life. My mom was first generation in the United States. She's from Slovakia. My dad was first generation. His family are from Ireland. And my mom was one of 8, and all of them qualified as a priest or a nun. And my dad is one of 3, and only one of the others didn't. And so, for them to do that obviously created a divide in the family. And so they left the church and kind of left their family, and got married and had me. I'm their only biological child. And then when I was 5 years old, my mom was killed in a pedestrian accident. She was walking our dog, and we're not sure what happened. The dog maybe jumped into the road, and she was hit instantly. She was found by a neighbor, and the neighbor came and told my dad. And that is my earliest memory of my dad telling me that my mom had died. My dad, I can't fault him, was an absolutely amazing man. He was a teacher, 39 years, Michigan, same classroom as you can only do in the United States. And he also ran a not-for-profit for low-income families, provided low-income housing, worked out some deal with the Michigan government to make it work. And so I spent, anytime I wasn't in school or playing outside, I was with my dad, visiting his tenants, painting, cleaning out gardens, fixing fences, screen doors. And the message was always made very clear to me about common humanity. And so I grew up with my dad until when I was 9, he married my best friend's mom. And my stepmom is still in my life. There's some emotional instability, and it was a rocky home life. And then when I was 22, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. I had spent most of my life waiting for him to die. I know how that sounds, but I also understand from a child's perspective that that is completely normal way to live when you've experienced losing a parent early. And so we got him through the treatment and it all went really well. And then he was considered in remission after 1 year. And then he died of a heart attack, which was related to the chemo in the middle of the night. And so in telling my story, I have shared this a lot of times because the common question is, where do your parents live, especially being an expat? I've said it so many times in my life, and I see the reaction from people. I completely understand that it's traumatic and it's hard. And I know there are so many people in the world, obviously, we all know, who have lost their parents. But I just never knew one. I never had one close at that age. And so you just get on with it, right? You just get on with life. My dad, being a emotionally evolved man, got me into counseling from 5 years old. So I did weekly counseling from 5 all the way through university. And I think that's obviously helped me in many ways. But I still, despite all of that, sharing my story, I tend to be quite open quickly on. I really love people. I really love talking. I've shared this so many times, but I didn't realize how much it was still impacting me. And it wasn't until this is hand over heart. I swear this human library has really changed my life very personally, because to share it so honestly and to have it be, I'll say it and you just skip over it, but I'm okay. Don't worry, this type of thing that so many of us do. You don't want someone to worry about you, but to have the time dedicated, it's maybe 18-minute session dedicated to just me, just sharing that story. That's not a counselor that I'm paying them for, right? These people have signed up to listen to me. It's like years of layers of masks came off. So it was trauma relief to be seen for my story. And I felt it, and I hand over, I know I don't need to say it here, but I am aware of the many privileges and all of these things. But that being true, my life has really been defined by these traumas. And then to have people just meet you with love and heart, oh, right, it really did something. Some of these people that came, so I'm a primary teacher and I have upper school teachers come and still say, let's have a cup of coffee. My mom passed away last year. Let's talk. And we do that. I mean, it really builds connection. And in my case, even more than that, it healed me. So when I think about the human library, I just think the limits are absolutely endless. And I don't think we can know, right? I would have never expected this. I thought I'm just going and telling the story I've told a million times, and I'm leaving with like this weight off of my chest that still exists. So yeah, I think it's mutual benefit for everyone involved.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say before we move on, it can be quite uncomfortable because of the different perspectives or the different stories. And I try to seek out people who are telling stories that, I would open my mind to something that I have no knowledge real about. And one of the ones I went to was a white woman, talking about what it was like to be a child and grow up in apartheid South Africa. And I thought, I'd like to hear this. And that was interesting to sit and listen to something where, you might have had some opinions, but just, let people speak and see where they're coming from. That was quite an eye-opener for me. I'm not saying it's the same, but I had recently watched The Zone of Interest, where people could live an idyllic and beautiful, wonderful, privileged life next to horror, on the other side of the wall. And it reminded me of that you can have this beautiful life and at the same time be able to, cope with the fact that around you there's something else going on that's horrific and unjust. So I found that was another thing that was good for people to listen to different maybe perspectives that they may not agree with, or it might make them feel uncomfortable. So, yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. Did you want to save this, Anne-Marie? Or maybe we could just put the link, we can share the link later. I think that's okay. This is just a very quick video of how it looked at ACS. We can play it. I'm not sure if it's just this kind of the small group.
Anyway. Yeah, just move it on. I mean, there's no need to look at that. Just go to the next slide, please.
And the next one is,
Yeah. This
so
was,
there-
yeah, we talk, I don't mind.
yeah,
Grade
so
5.
we were inspired by the grade 5, sorry, were inspired by our human library. And so they picked it up and did the same thing. And they shared, they integrated it with one of their PYP units, which was on migration. And they invited in their families, etc. So yeah, that's a nice one. We'll make sure that we share the links to these stories. I'm just conscious of time. All right, next, please. And just some staff feedback. So I counted it up this week. We had 57 pieces of feedback from staff. Now, I always ask for feedback in everything that I do, always. You almost never get it. This was incredible. And it was these types of things again and again and again and again. So it was resoundingly positive over and over about various themes, but the same things repeated. A lot about we should have done this a really long time ago, right? There's always going to be that attitude, and but respectfully, I agree. Bringing people together, things that I didn't know about someone, every metaphor about a book is, but it keeps going. There's a sequel, there's more. Let's have another one. Don't judge a book by its cover, of course, that type of thing. But just a lot about, please don't let this be the only thing. Let this be continuing a trend of what we're focusing our dedicated staff meeting time on is people, people, people. Whenever you're ready, there's another page of it as well. Thought it was a nice thing to share. And my personal favorite was that last one there. It was just about, we can never underestimate the power of storytelling and sharing our common humanity. I think it's a couple of things I wanted to be sure to say is that the human library, there's no expense in terms of financial expense at all. All you need is a space and people that are willing to volunteer. So therefore a community that are committed to coming closer together. You need someone to give you the time. We're lucky. Our head of school is very much on board with DIB. It was a no-brainer. We've got it twice in the year. But I would say, so this is a really low burden, incredibly high impact initiative. And I think if I had to choose one thing of all different things that we've tried, et cetera, and especially considering the anecdotal feedback, this is the one that has the most impact and is probably the lowest burden as well in terms of planning. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so finally we were just looking at, where we are now and what we learned from that. And really, when I spoke to the librarian at Chadwick School in the beginning, when I was asking her, you've run it for a few years, like what do we do? How does it work? She said, as soon as you've done the logistics and set it off, it just takes on a life of its own. And that's one of the powerful things we found out. It is just people want to hear stories about each other. People want to be recognized as having an identity and being part of a group, but they also want to understand and have others believe that even though they are part of a group, they are not exactly the same as every other member of that group. So I look like I look Black, but I am not exactly the same as every other person who comes from my group. We've all got stories, we've all got unique stories to tell. And that was one of the things that really stuck out for us. As Lauren said, it's almost like trauma relief when you're talking about something quite heavy that's happened in your life and quite traumatic, and people are listening with care and empathy, and they're making comments and they're asking questions, and you felt it. Yeah, it feels like unburdening. So I won't read them all, but you can see them for yourself. But these are the kind of things that we thought of. The strong feedback was that we have to dedicate the entire session to a human library. The first human library we had, we were given, all this fighting for time. We were given an hour. The second one, we were given like an hour and 15 minutes, so it's like, so that we could do something else. So people had done all this kind of opening up and listening and communication and contact. And then suddenly you're like, right, let's look at the strategic plan. People fed back unanimously, like, no, it just needs to be dedicated to the event. And that's it. We need to make it a regular event. And we have 2 sister schools in Britain, in England. So we would like to maybe extend it to them, or have ones where we meet each other. And I suppose ultimately, beyond the community, beyond the school community, or parents, people outside, and students, the students themselves. And we have actually had human libraries set up here at our school years ago, but it was on a different vein. It was about finding a topic, researching it, and then sharing your expertise. So it was a different kind of direction. So these are the kind of things that we came up when we reflected on what could we go forward with, basically. Yeah. I think that's it. Lauren, do you want to say something?
Oh, I think that's it. We'd love to. I am conscious of time. I'm sorry. You get us started about human libraries and we haven't got a pause button. But if you, we're really happy to take any questions or comments, please. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you all. Let's get some virtual love to Anna Marie and Lauren. And if you have questions, you can hop on here, unmute, or you can toss them in the chat and we'll look out for them.
Thank you, everybody.
I just want to say thank you, ladies, for being so vulnerable and sharing your stories. I know this is something you've done many times, but it doesn't make it, I would imagine it doesn't make it easier, because there's still some emotional attachment. There's still some lingering trauma that's tied to the stories that we do share. I just think the whole concept is amazing. And I'd love to try it out with a group of folks one day. So I appreciate you all for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question. How many times a year do you host the Human Library, and how do you recruit people to participate?
Well, we've done 2. What was the gap between them? We did one in October.
In October and April. Yeah.
April was the next one. And basically we sent out, sort of did presentations to the staff in the, all the staff meetings, explained the concept, and talked really, as I said before, really reiterated that it's not a presentation, it's a conversation, because some people don't want to feel that they've got to talk in front of people. But actually, you can recruit people just by thinking, oh, I think, your story, I know your story, that would be interesting. People would be interested in it. In fact, one of the security guards, he had a really interesting story, but then we hadn't extended it to the rest of the staff. And so I've got some people in mind, but it's just convincing people, or people feel like their story is not interesting enough. A colleague of mine was just, what am I going to say? What have I got to say? And actually, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be like traumatic. It can just be something that's important to you. The other thing that's important to say to people is that it's how, your stories, even if they're things that happened a long time ago in your life, they're stories, they shape you. And as you're talking to a group of people, you start to think of other things that you didn't really plan to say. When I was doing mine, I started talking about myself as an adult, and the experiences I've had even as an international educator in international schools, and the way I've been regarded or treated, or the reaction that people have had to me. So it just generates itself as you're talking. But yeah, you just have to make people feel comfortable that it's going to be, it's not going to be a performance, and it doesn't have to be interesting, because it will be interesting to other people. Yeah.
That was thank you. Yeah, that was something I meant to add earlier, was that so many people said, I haven't got an interesting story.
Yeah.
And right, isn't that interesting how we feel? I thought the same. And it just brings out all this self-reflection too. I mean, the self-reflection piece. It wasn't until I was sharing my story that I realized, actually, I think this is why I went into this work. For so long, I was thinking it was about radically dreaming for a better world for my own children who I fall into a minoritized group, etc. But I think actually this has been within me for a really long time because I can understand this feeling of feeling othered, right? So it's the self-reflection piece is really great. Thank you, Shireen, for your comment.
All right, do we have any other questions? Either you could open your mic and share, or you could just put in the chat.
I mean, I have like a million technical questions. I don't know if everyone else wants to hear them. Like, for example, you said you do it during your staff meeting time. Is it like I sign up to go to one session as a reader, and it's like I think you mentioned 18-minute storytelling, and then is the rest of the time used with that same group, or do you sort of like go to one, have a conversation for like 30 minutes and then go to another story? How does that work?
So go ahead, Anne-Marie.
So we had like 18-minute sessions with a couple of minutes changeover. So if I was a human book, then I had 2 slots to be the book, and I had 1 slot to go read another book. So I really only got a chance to read 1 book as a reader. But if you're not as a book, so if you're not a reader, if you're not a book, you can read 3 books. So it works like that. That was the time it could fit in. It's also exhausting, I think. So you tell your story 3 times. I think more than that, it could start to get a little bit like, oh my God, I hear my voice over and over again saying the same thing. So, and there's different people have signed up. So you always get a different group of people that are reading you. So yeah.
Yeah, and so we had, the first time I think I said we had almost 25 people sign up. And then the next round, we had almost all of the same, minus a really small handful wanted to do it another time. And one person that chose not to was because they had said they actually just really wanted to just enjoy the stories this time, which is really fair, right? But we had some other people, and that came out in the feedback was, when are we going to do it again? I have a story I'd like to share. And just on that, one of those stories, it was really powerful. It was a colleague who had quite a traumatic thing happen, and it happened in recent years when so a lot of us knew that colleague at the time, but we didn't know the details, and obviously it's not our business really. And so, but he had come to share that, and so the crowd around him was huge. And I maybe it's people being nosy, but hopefully it's people just being really supportive and knowing that colleague, that really would have meant a lot. So it's surprising how invested people get, or maybe it's not surprising.
Yeah, I think it's not surprising, probably. And it is just, at the end of the day, it's breaking down barriers when that's it. And the human library that's, the official human library around the world is obviously about breaking down. I just think as soon as you hear a story from someone, it suddenly makes them more human, and that's it. It's super simple. It just suddenly makes them like you, they're not another, some cardboard cutout that's not real like you are. They become as real as you are. And, you can spread it and take it further and further, but we've just done it in our school, in our teaching community so far. So we'll see.
Common community. Yeah. If anyone has any technical questions, please reach out to us. We're happy, and any of it can be shared. I did have the intention of even putting our sign-up sheet on a slide, but there's a lot to it. So we'll put the offer. This is all available. You can have the badge. We had little badges that said, I am the story. We have the book, the blurbs, all of that. That's all. We'll just share it. You can make it your own if you want. Just please reach out.
I have a lot of resources if anyone's interested. I've got lots of reading and lots of stuff. So if anyone wants, you can have it.
Awesome. We have one more question here. Thanks, Catherine. She said, I'm wondering about processing time. If there are about 30-minute blocks to tell a story and maybe ask follow-up questions and transition to another story, do folks also need time to wrap up and or process with other readers or other books?
Lauren?
So I can tell you how we've done it. I think the processing time is a really good point. We're always up against the clock, and we've reflected both times on this. So the first time we did it, I think we had 16 minutes, right? And then there was maybe few minute turnover. So the books kind of knew that in advance. So maybe thought about making sure the story can fit in and have the questions answered type of thing. I know I did. And the timing wise, it was okay. I mean, obviously the story is a little bit different every time because it's not a presentation. And then the next time we had a little bit longer. The timing seems to actually work. I think the one thing, exactly as Anne Marie has said, is that it can get heavy. It can get hard for everybody listening to this stuff. So that's an important thing to think about. Did we answer your question?
Not sure. That's
not
what I
sure.
have to go over to you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if we've answered it, but we're happy to talk any of it through. I think probably the answer is the more time, the better.
Yeah.
But we're always just up against what the time we're given, really.
Here's another guy in emails coming in. Elizabeth asks, have you ever had any controversies?
Ooh, so we've only done 2 so far, not yet. I've heard that the woman I was in consultation with, when they did it, they had controversy in terms of there was 2 parents who were wives of each other, and that was a little bit of a controversy for some of the other parents who came and listened. But afterwards, so when they read the title, they were like, oh no. But afterwards, their feedback was that their mind was opened, and they were, they could understand it now, that actually, 2 people love each other, and that's the end of it, really. But with us so far, because we're in a sort of closed group in a way, we're in an international school, teachers, there's nothing, I mean, I don't know, you might have another opinion, Lauren.
No, I think a couple things work in our favor. No, the answer is no. We've not had controversy. And I can really say, minus if in terms of all of our DEIB initiatives, somehow, some way, we've really been able to have a good 4 years going strong with next to none. You have parents with some questions, but what happens is usually we have our leaders who speak to the parents that come to them directly, almost always, and have the conversation about how this is our tone. We're focusing on positive self-identity and common humanity. These are our values as well. We're very, very clear where we stand with it. And our message is that everyone's welcome. Share your thoughts. We want to hear from you. You can come to our meetings or have a conversation, and that's it. And I hear about it after. So I think a few things that work with us in terms of being able to avoid controversies is that there's a lot of the school leaders are really on board, and they're on board because from the very top it's on board, and it's also widespread now. Everyone knows the council exists. It's big, and we try to keep the comms going and that type of thing. So I think that's helped us. It's the message, and this like everyone's welcome type of thing. Yes, Joel. We are really, really fortunate.
And I must say, the demographic of our school, I mean, it's an international school, and if you look at it on paper, it does have a lot of nationalities, so in my class, I've got 12 children, and I don't think there'll be like 2 or 3 who'll share the same nationality. But in terms of race, and it's very, very, very small percentage of people of color in our school. And that's where, so my role, racial equity, sometimes I think, okay, how to approach this, but it's probably more important.
It's more important. We just talk about it, don't we?
Way,
The earliest stage. Yeah, we
Yeah.
talk really, really openly about it's even more important.
And that's why I thought it was important that, in the book, being a human book was really important to try and get across some of those things, even though it is my personal story, at least, because some people were listening and they were horrified, and my life isn't that horrifying. I was telling them things that my experience, but some people were like, this is just, I feel really angry, and I feel really, ashamed to be white. And it's just, I wasn't saying anything, super dramatic or compared to what other people's experiences, but to those people it was, because they never thought about it before, never imagined it. So yeah.
It's amazing to be able to have this discussion with people.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's so nice. Yeah.
Listening to us.
Thank you, everyone.
Getting on and on.
All right. Well, we appreciate both of y'all. Again, thank you for sharing the work that you all are doing, information about the charter, and what you're doing just as a community. And we appreciate that. And for those that want to know more and reach out more, in terms of getting this started in your community, as Anne Marie and Lauren said, feel free, please reach out to them. Again, we appreciate you all. This is a great way to close out our academic year, and just a reminder, as that quote said, Lauren, at the bottom of that one slide, in terms of that centering and thinking about our common humanity. And I think one way that really fuels in that piece is that we're all human, bottom line. Even when we disagree, even when we we see something that's just like, oh, that just boils me. It's like, again, sometimes it's like taking that pause and coming back, and saying, okay, there's a why behind that, so and I think that it's a reminder for us that this work, as Kwame opened and said, that it's a marathon, and a lot of that work is taking the mirror and looking at it. A lot of times we sometimes forget about that. It's like, we got to look at ourselves in the mirror, and acknowledge where we're at and the work that we need to consistently do, and the work that we want to see in the world, so we appreciate y'all. Any other closing comments before we head on out? All right, great people. Join us. We got some more stuff going on in May, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Again, thank you, ACS. Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you, Lauren, again, for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. All the best.
Thanks again, Kwame.
Bye. Thank you.